A teenager's body found dumped in the woods.
He sees a Rubbermaid bin. He lifts the lid and actually realizes that he is looking at a dead body. Cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation. He was thrown out like trash.
When I got that phone call, I was enraged.
His family explains he was supposed to be on a college admissions trip.
He was applying to university for art.
He was an artistic, intelligent, and beautiful soul.
But the investigation reveals it was all a lie.
I emailed the art school, but nobody emailed me back.
She had created and fabricated this entire story.
And when a surprising eyewitness steps forward, she points detectives to members of the victim's own family.
She took the time to learn what made him happy, and she used that as a way to kill him.
You saying I murdered somebody? That's correct.
This is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases that I've ever worked.
She's just pure evil.
April 2nd, 2017. In Richmond, Virginia, a man is taking a break from work when he comes across a strange object.
As he's taking his smoke break and walking through the woods, he sees a Rubbermaid bin. As he gets closer, he sees what he believes to be a shoe sticking out of the bin.
Curiosity, of course, strikes him, and he goes over.
He lifts the lid and actually realizes that he is looking at a dead body.
Henry, 911, what's the address of the emergency?
Yes, I found a dead body over in the woods. I just reported it. I don't know what to do.
Okay. I've got the police car. Were they still breathing at all?
No, they're in a tote, like in a tote.
They start taking photographs. What we see when we open the lid of the box is a young black male that the only way I can describe it is kind of like put in like an accordion. Knees tucked to the chest.
Detectives notice powder covering the body.
It was determined that it was lime, which will stop decay of human flesh. Detectives had a theory that lime was put in the box with the body so that whenever this individual was found, if ever, it would be very hard to determine the timing of the death and maybe how they died. Homicide detectives lay a white sheet down on the grass and roll the bin over so that they can remove the body. And it's at that point when they discover that actually behind the back of the individual, the wrists have been bound with a purple athletic type tape.
No cutting of the skin, no bruising of the body, nothing that would suggest there had been any trauma inflicted on this individual.
When they search the police database for missing persons, investigators find a possible match.
It was determined that there was a missing persons report for an individual that had been filed several weeks earlier by the Sisters of Martre Coles. They pulled up his DMV photograph in the system, and they were able to determine that those two photographs were a match, and that we were dealing with the body of Martre Coles. This is a 19-year-old boy that no one has seen or heard from in weeks. No one was notified, including his family. And that was a strategic decision that was made by law enforcement because they felt like they were able to have the upper hand and potentially gain more information if everybody still thought Martre was just a missing person. There were a lot of questions that detectives had about who could have done this, when this death occurred, and why this would have happened.
Martre Coles was born on October 22, 1997, the youngest of 8 children raised by Maurice and Karina Coles.
As a kid, Martre was more of a loner due to him being the youngest. He was always under our mother. She would take him everywhere.
Martre was funny, sensitive, and he was very smart.
From an early age, he exhibited a passion for art.
My mom's father actually introduced Martre into drawing. I feel like drawing brought Martre was his peace.
He wanted to go to school for video games, like drawing for video games and stuff.
Tragedy changed Martre's plans for the future when his mother suddenly died of a heart attack in 2014.
My mom's passing affected Martre in a major way. He wasn't himself anymore. He was lost without my mother being around.
I feel like he changed, like, internally. I saw some depression. He really didn't know how he could function and move on without my mom.
Martre's siblings, being in their 20s, had already moved out of the home, which left him with only his grieving father, Maurice, for support.
They both were destroyed. They both were dealing with their own personal feelings behind the death. So my dad couldn't tend to Martre mourning when he was mourning that he lost his wife.
One of Maurice's friends and co-workers, Denise Gay, saw what was happening and offered to help. She was a single mother raising 5 children of her own.
My mother is like the typical, like what most people end up seeing as the mother bear.
Denise was kind of Maurice's shoulder to cry on when his wife died.
Denise treated Martre like a son. And as she spent more time at the house, her friendship with Maurice blossomed into romance.
I was feeling like Maurice is going to end up being like the last relationship that she would have for a significant amount of time because they both seem like very happy.
Before long, Maurice invited Denise and her youngest daughter to move in with them.
Even though Martre's father was not married to Denise, they were living in somewhat of a step-family situation.
I didn't care to get to know her. I don't know what type of woman would move into a dead woman's home within a month. She didn't rub me the right way when I married. My father, he was a Rolling Stone. That's been presented to me all of my life, so that wasn't really shocking.
Martre, he was still mourning his mother, but after a while, maybe like a couple months or so, he did start warming up to my mother because she was explaining to him, like, I'm not here to replace your mother, but I am a person who is going to be here for you.
By 2017, Martre seemed to be recovering from his grief. He'd even started dating.
Martre had a unique relationship with his girlfriend. They had met in high school, and they actually communicated almost 24 hours a day.
He was also bonding with Denise's children.
And we both did want to work in like the game industry, him on the art side, me on the more like coding programming side of it.
He was applying to Full Sail University for art.
Denise was assisting him, like reaching out to the counselor to get a tour. Martre was very excited about going to Full Sail, and that they contacted him and that they were in a different state. He was excited about possibly starting something new.
But Martre never got the chance to fulfill his dreams. Instead, he's become the victim of an unthinkable homicide. And Virginia police are beginning their investigation.
Martre Coles' body was taken to the office of the medical examiner for an autopsy.
The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation.
There are 2 substances found in the bloodstream of this individual, that being trazodone and traces of GHB. GHB, of course, being the street name for what we call the date rape drug. Trazodone is used often for people who are having trouble sleeping.
Potentially what happened was this person was drugged, passed out, and maybe even put in the box in that particular accordion position while still alive and suffocated inside of the box.
The just callousness of the actions. Why did a 19-year-old have to die like this?
Coming up, investigators find a potential eyewitness.
You all right? All good? You got in trouble, right?
As she's in her room watching TV, she hears a scream coming from the room next door.
When detectives study Martre's missing persons report, they learn it was filed 20 days earlier on March 13th by his sisters, Michelle and Marquisha Coles. Using the information provided by the sisters in their report, homicide investigators are able to start piecing together the events of the day Martre vanished.
The last time I saw Martre, we had a birthday get-together for my sister. And I took him back home so he could get ready to go and visit the school.
He was going to be going on a trip out of town to Full Sail University in Florida, where he was hoping to be admitted as an art student.
According to the report, Martre needed to put the finishing touches on an art project for his application before leaving for Florida.
He was to take it to school with him, and it was a mask of his face.
The sisters wished him luck and went home to rest.
I went to sleep. I woke up to about 80 missed calls.
She had numerous calls missed from Martre's girlfriend. She is very concerned that something has happened to him.
Martre was not responding to her messages.
Michelle reached out to her sister, Marquisha, and they head over there to the residence.
When the sisters returned to the house just a few hours after dropping off their brother, Denise told them Martre had already left. She told them while packing, Martre realized he left his wallet at Michelle's house.
The last time she saw him, he was walking out of the house saying he was going to walk to Michelle's to get his wallet.
But Martre never showed up.
We kind of rode around the neighborhood just to see if we saw him walking up the street, and there was no sign of him. We went to and filed a police report the next morning.
They document the report and put it into the system, but unfortunately, because he is legally an adult at the time, they're not going to put out a notice for people to look for him.
Before they can interview Martre's sisters, investigators make an alarming connection.
Another member of the police department came to them and said, "Hey, this is triggering a memory of a report from not even a week ago.
2 weeks after Martre had gone missing, a security alarm had gone off at the Coles house.
2 Henrico police officers had responded, and when they got there late at night, the 2 people that were at the home were LaToya Gay, which is Denise's oldest daughter, and then her younger sister, Denise's youngest daughter.
When the officers asked LaToya what happened, she said it was her younger sister acting out.
The 12-year-old gets mad at her older sister, and she actually activates an alarm, and law enforcement responds. Henrico police have body-worn cameras, so we're able to watch this interaction of what unfolds.
You all right? All good? You got in trouble, right?
You gotta explain to her that everything she does has a consequence.
Yeah, I think we've had that talk before.
So police had been out to this house before.
The youngest daughter has been getting in trouble lately. Was the reason why the one police officer had that familiarity with the young lady.
They determined that there was really nothing wrong other than 2 sisters that were having a dispute.
Before the officers left, the youngest daughter asked to speak with the officer she recognized. Once they were in private, she told him a disturbing story.
What'd she say? Tell me this one.
The 12-year-old says it happened on the morning of March 12th. As she's in her room watching TV, she hears a scream coming from the room next door. So she got up, she goes into the hallway, gets to the door of Martre's bedroom, and looks in.
She had seen her mother and her sister pin him to the ground, one at his feet and one on his chest.
She describes something that looked kind of white on his face, but then catches eyes with her mother, who gives her the hand gesture to move on and go away. She went back to her room, and the next thing she recalls is hearing a noise, and she peeks open from her bedroom door to see her sister pushing a plastic bin down the hallway.
Are you being truthful, or are you making this up because you're mad?
At the time, officers didn't know what to make of the story, so they called her mother, Denise.
She's accusing LaToya, a sister she had just gotten in a fight with, so it sounds like trying to get back at her sister. Denise pretty much confirms she thinks that's what it is.
Make up a lot of stuff trying to get out of trouble, but you can't get out of trouble.
At the time, the officers chalked it up to an overactive imagination. They file a report, but don't investigate further. But now, detectives wonder if it was more than that.
She mentions Martre's body being put in a bin and taken away from the house. And when they realize how specific that description is and how closely it matches the way that Martre's body was found, they then become very concerned that it is possible this little girl was telling the truth. Immediately, LaToya and Denise are now suspects.
April 3rd, 2017. It's been 1 day since the body of 19-year-old Martre Coles was found dumped in the Virginia woods. Now armed with body cam footage of Denise Gay's daughter describing Martre's death, detectives proceed with caution. They ask Martre's older sisters to come in for an interview without informing them they've found his body.
The investigators know that something isn't quite right with Denise Gay. So there is a decision made that it was not going to be shared with the family at that time, that a body was found on April 2nd.
They ended up calling us down to the precinct for further questions on the relationship between Denise and Martre.
According to the sisters, Martre and Denise got along well enough in the beginning.
Martre told me that his relationship with Denise was pretty good, that she would talk to him, help him with like homework and things like that, help him with his art.
His bigger problems were really with Denise's daughter. She was a very troubled young girl. She would pick fights with people.
She had been, taking his stuff and destroying his things and, stuff like that.
Okay.
She was drawing stuff on the floors and trying to make it seem like as if Trey was drawing it. Just a lot of weird things started happening in the home.
Whenever Maurice would discover something had happened, Denise would say that the problems were Martre's fault to cover for her daughter.
The sisters reveal the issues between Martre and Denise's 12-year-old daughter only got worse.
They got into physical fights where they would push each other and yell and scream.
She was stabbing him and stuff.
She picked up some scissors and allegedly stabbed Martre in the head. Denise hid that from Maurice.
I asked Martre, have you told my mom? Have you told Maurice that all these things are happening? He's like, yeah, I did. And they say they're going to handle it. I'm just going to stay in my room and keep to myself.
According to his sisters, Martre began to suspect Denise was doing more than just hiding her daughter's behavior. She was encouraging it.
Martre expressed to me that he felt like Denise was like trying to create a wedge between him and my father.
I think Denise wanted Martre gone because that was something of my mother's left in the home, and she was very jealous of my mom.
And what was his relationship with your dad like?
Iffy. Like, he felt like my dad didn't like him. He felt like my dad didn't want him there.
Marquisha and Michelle say it was one of the reasons why Martre was looking forward to college.
He was excited about possibly starting something new, getting away from everything that was going on.
But in the weeks since his disappearance, they discovered something strange.
I emailed the art school, but nobody emailed me back.
His girlfriend knew that he had been communicating with Full Sail University, and they shared email information. She logged into his emails and looked through them.
She said that he was having a conversation with someone named Sheila Crenshaw.
Martre's girlfriend did some digging of her own and said, wait a second, this email is written pretty poorly, and then it's written and sent from a Gmail address. No legit university is going to have a Gmail address.
When the detectives reach out to Full Sail University, they find out that there is no one by the name of Sheila Crenshaw.
Someone had come up with Sheila's name and was trying to trick Martre into thinking that this woman was talking to him from the administration office at Full Sail University.
Coming up, a mysterious figure returns to the scene of the crime.
There are some still shot frames of an SUV and someone wearing a hoodie.
And investigators close in on their killers.
What happened?
You killed him in your house. The last time you saw him, he was in a storage bin.
Just 24 hours into the hunt for 19-year-old Martre Coles' killer, investigators have a possible eyewitness to his death, and now evidence that someone tricked him into going on a college tour.
Someone went through a lot of trouble in this ruse to get Martre to believe he had been accepted at Full Sail University.
A search warrant is obtained and is executed on April 3rd at the residence. At that time, nobody is actually in the house. We are going to want to see if we can find anything in the bedroom itself that might help identify what these two women were doing to Martre.
Detectives find nothing to support the idea that Martre left for his college visit.
Everything that he owned appeared to still be present in that room. His computer, his backpack.
But there is also nothing to support Denise's daughter's story about witnessing a crime.
During the search warrant, other things that were taken for evidence included laptops that belonged to Denise Gay and Martre's own laptop. Ultimately, they are turned over to the FBI for a full analysis of the data.
As the search continues, Denise's older daughter, LaToya, shows up at the house.
It's very apparent that she's uncomfortable and she's agitated, and she actually walks outside and sits down in her car and has a phone conversation that's fairly lengthy.
The next thing that is very interesting is that she actually leaves the residence before the search is completed.
Because of her demeanor, detectives ask other officers to actually follow her to see where she goes.
Officers follow LaToya to a familiar location.
LaToya led them right to where Martre's body was found. Investigators hadn't released any information to the family about the body. The only one that could possibly know where that body was located was the killer.
What we believe she was doing at that time was trying to see if there was any police activity that had the body been found.
Obviously, they immediately realized that the story provided by the youngest daughter is highly likely to be accurate. Another officer indicates that he actually has a motion-activated hunting camera, and they decide that it would be interesting to see if anybody else returns to that site.
And it was placed on a tree that would capture both the location of where the box was found as well as the bit of road.
5 days later, the camera captures grainy images of someone entering the dump site.
During the later part of April 7th, there are some still shot frames of what first looks like a SUV that is parked right there at the opening of the wooded area. Then we have another silhouette image that the best that can be described is someone who appears to be wearing a hoodie. There's no other defining aspects to this silhouette, nothing to suggest if it's a man or a woman.
Although detectives cannot identify the figure, they do notice something about the vehicle.
It was a dark SUV with flashy rims.
Martre's father, Maurice Coles, owns a large black SUV, and his vehicle actually had some pretty unique rims.
If we were making a conclusion that that was Maurice's car, we had to ask ourselves, Did Maurice Coles have something to do with the death of his son, Martray?
The list of potential conspirators in Martray Coles' murder has now grown to include his father, Maurice.
Maurice's black SUV was driven by himself and Denise. Nobody else had access to use that vehicle. The detectives decide that they need to verify the whereabouts of Denise and Maurice at the time that those photographs were taken.
Both Maurice and Denise work at a processing plant in Smithfield, Virginia, about an hour and a half southeast of Richmond. So police check their work schedules around the time the SUV was spotted at the dump site.
By using the cameras of the parking lot, but more importantly, the electronic time card, we were confident that Maurice Coles was in Smithfield during the evening hours of April 7th. That was not him in the image.
The evidence might rule out Maurice, but it further incriminates Denise. Records indicate she left work early on April 7th.
Denise is actually on security footage leaving the building and getting into the black SUV.
We were able to use the technology for the GPS location to track Denise's phone.
The cell phone data shows that Denise leaves Smithfield and comes back north, and it actually traces her going right past the location where Martray's body had been found.
Since only the killer could know the location of Martray's body, investigators can now tie Denise to the murder.
The evidence also confirmed that the 12-year-old girl is telling the truth. Her story was legit, and the implications of Denise and LaToya being involved were true.
On April 10th, Denise is brought in for questioning.
Okay, and I don't think that it's a surprise why you're here. Right?
You're saying I murdered somebody.
That's correct. You know why you're here.
No. What happened?
You killed him in your house. The last time you saw him, he was in a storage bin.
She just says, I don't know what you're talking about, and will not admit to anything.
Following the interview, detectives place Denise under arrest. Their next target is LaToya.
What we learned was that LaToya Gay had actually left the Commonwealth, and we find her in South Carolina with some family members.
You can't run away from it anymore, okay? There's a murder warrant for you.
For me? Why is it for me?
And it almost comes across as she's not surprised that they're arresting someone for murder, but she's surprised that they're arresting her for murder.
The initial idea was that we would maybe see if LaToya would cooperate and testify against her mother, but it was very clear that she was not going to be cooperating.
Now that police have their suspects in custody, they're able to notify Martray's sisters of his death.
I was enraged. When I got that phone call, everything just was checked off of how I felt about Denise from the beginning. I knew she was pure evil when I met her.
It was very difficult for them to know that we had known for many days before they did that their brother was dead. But they ultimately understood the decision. Once we've arrested LaToya and Denise, we still don't really understand why this crime has occurred. We keep doing further investigation and did criminal background checks on both of them.
That check reveals Denise has an extensive criminal record.
And what was interesting is that a lot of her criminal history related to fraudulent behavior and lies and deceit.
The FBI's analysis of Denise's laptop reveals her latest fraud.
Investigators found the email account of Sheila Crenshaw on Denise's computer.
Denise Gay was in fact this Sheila Crenshaw.
She had created and fabricated this entire Full Sail University story so that she could explain why later he would be absent and no one could find him.
We are also learning about some of the searches that were done on Denise's computer regarding Lyme, GHB, suffocation, and why would someone be asking for those types of questions if they didn't play a role in some particular actions.
Despite these discoveries, the case against Denise remains largely circumstantial. With a 12-year-old as their only eyewitness, prosecutors hope it will be enough to secure a conviction.
What was the motive for why these two grown women would harm this young man in the way that they did?
On December 8, 2017, Denise and LaToya Gay stand trial for the murder of Martre Coles.
Our best theory of a motive relates to Denise's relationship with Maurice. Maurice lost his wife, who he dearly loved.
Denise looked at Martre as being the last thing that was reminding Maurice of what he had had before.
Denise snapped because jealousy got the best of her.
Prosecutors say the evidence shows Denise plotted for weeks to kill Martre, and she manipulated LaToya into helping her.
Denise saw her children as accessories to her criminal behavior.
Denise's youngest daughter is the state's star witness.
We believe that she drugged him, and once he became somewhat woozy, LaToya comes into the room to assist her in holding him down. The evidence from the youngest daughter is that Denise is actually on his chest. We don't know if he suffocated from the weight or if they were just able to take control of him. He was thrown out like trash. He was put in a Rubbermaid bin and tossed in the woods.
The defense attempts to undermine the young girl's testimony.
The defense wanted the jury to believe that this troubled 12-year-old is actually the killer.
Not only was Denise Gay going to not accept any responsibility, but that worse, she would try to pin this case on her 12-year-old daughter.
When the jury delivers its verdict, it comes as a shock to everyone in the courtroom.
They convicted both Denise and LaToya with conspiracy, but they didn't actually convict them on first-degree murder. The jury was hung, which to this day I still don't understand.
Prosecutors immediately prepare for a retrial, and a new witness comes forward.
Within a couple of days, Maurice Coles calls detectives.
Seeing the actual evidence in front of him made him believe what he had never wanted to believe before, that a woman that he had brought into his home and he thought cared for him and his family had actually killed his son.
Maurice was cleaning the house out, and he had found Denise's purse in this closet. In the purse was her wallet and her cell phone. In the wallet, we found the actual receipt of the purchase of a shovel.
And once we had her physical phone, we had the actual text messages that she and LaToya had been exchanging.
Denise was communicating with her daughter, LaToya, that she could not find the body on April 7th. That gave us clear and convincing evidence that that was in fact Denise Gay in that image of the game camera.
The new evidence makes the outcome of the second trial less uncertain.
Ultimately, both women wound up being convicted of first-degree murder.
Denise Gay was given a life plus 10 years sentence. LaToya Gay is going to be serving a 30-year sentence.
I don't think that a mother with any type of compassion for her children would put her daughters in that type of predicament.
Denise is just pure evil.
This case is one of the saddest and most disturbing cases that I've ever worked. She took the time to get to know Martre and learn what made him happy, and she used that as a way to kill him.
I do still talk to both my mother and my sister on a regular basis. I do still believe they might not have done it, but Martre should be remembered as this really outgoing, kind person.
If Martre was alive today, I would see him living somewhere in California, being an artist.
I just want him to be remembered as artistic, intelligent, and beautiful soul.
Prayers for their success. For a short time, Chow and Hong felt a renewed sense of hope, believing that their financial struggles would soon be a thing of the past. Yet, as the months rolled by, the business did not recover. Instead of stepping back to reassess, the family found themselves caught in a cycle of desperation. Daphne insisted that the negative energy surrounding their business were exceptionally stubborn, requiring increasingly complex, expensive rituals to dismantle, trusting in her perceived spiritual authority. Chow and Hong continued to pour their remaining funds into her services, running up a staggering debt that eventually ballooned to between $250,000 and $280,000. They were trapped in a web of spiritual promises and financial ruin. Completely unaware the dark design's quiet greed was weaving around them. Chapter 3. A Morning of Devastation. The morning of June 10th, year 2012, began with a clear, pale blue sky over Arlington, but for the family of Long and Hong, it would forever be remembered as the day the light went out. At precisely 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers received an urgent, trembling phone call from Chow Tran. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that they had not answered their phone and that his family was growing deeply concerned. When the responding officers arrived at the quiet apartment complex, they found several family members gathered outside, their faces pale with anxiety. The officers noticed that one of the apartment windows was slightly ajar, which was highly unusual for the security-conscious elderly couple. Officer Weller, a seasoned officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to cross the threshold. Inside, the apartment was in complete disarray, bearing the typical chaotic hallmarks of a burglary. Drawers were pulled out, belongings were scattered across the floor, and furniture was overturned. The officer called out, his voice echoing through quiet rooms, but only silence answered. He checked the kitchen, the living room, and the bathroom, finding them completely empty. Finally, Officer Weller entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared vacant, but as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught several smudges on the wall next to a small, unassuming closet door. A deep, instinctual hesitation washed over him, a quiet warning from within. Steeling his resolve, he gently pulled the closet door open. The sight that greeted him was one of profound tragedy. Restricting his description to respect the dignity of the departed, the officer discovered the gentle elderly couple, Long and Hong, bound tightly with heavy gray duct tape. It was immediately clear that they had suffered a violent assault and had passed away. Weller, despite his years of training, was left momentarily speechless by the sheer heartlessness of the act. He walked out into the living room, took a deep breath, and called for the homicide investigators and the crime scene unit. Chapter 4. The Stage Scene and the Cold Years. Detective Stuart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years on the force, arrived shortly after. He stood in the apartment, looking at the chaotic scene. The level of violence directed toward a sweet, harmless elderly couple who had no known enemies seemed completely senseless. As the crime scene technicians meticulously gathered evidence, they discovered several items that felt oddly out of place. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette. Nearby, a light blue bandana was wrapped carefully around a glass beer bottle. At first glance, these items strongly suggested the involvement of local youth gangs, who were known to occasionally use specific colors as a calling card. However, Detective Stewart's seasoned instincts told him to look closer. The scene felt almost too perfect, as if someone had deliberately placed these items to tell a specific story to the police. He suspected the burglary and the gang signs were a sophisticated staging attempt designed to divert attention away from the true perpetrator. The subsequent autopsy at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office revealed a grim truth. The couple had not perished from physical trauma, but had suffocated due to the restrictive layers of duct tape applied to their faces. The sheer cruelty of the act suggested a deeply personal motive rather than a random, chaotic robbery. During the initial interviews, Chow Tran acted as a primary spokesperson for the grieving family, explaining that they had all been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday the evening before. He painted a picture of a close-knit, loving family, though he admitted the sewing business had been struggling. Shortly after the funeral, a standard notification from an insurance company revealed that Long and Hong carried a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, with Chow Tran listed as a primary beneficiary. While this raised temporary questions, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of their business. Without any concrete evidence, fingerprints, or matching hereditary codes from a crime scene, the investigation eventually stalled. The years stretched on, and the tragic files were placed into the cold case archives, waiting for a single spark of truth to light the way. Chapter 5. The Catalyst of Justice. That spark arrived unexpectedly in October of the year 2015. The path of justice is often winding, and in this case, it began with an unusual incident involving the theft of a horse in Houston. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for the offense, which constituted a felony in the state of Texas. Because of his felony conviction as an adult, his unique genetic profile was entered into the national database for the first time. Within days, the system flagged a miraculous match. The hereditary markers from the discarded marijuana cigarette found at the Arlington crime scene in 2012 belonged to Willie Guillory. At the time of the murders, Willie had been a mere 16-year-old youth with no prior adult record, explaining why his profile had never appeared in the database during the initial investigation. Detectives quickly brought Willie in for questioning. Faced with the undeniable scientific evidence of his presence at the scene, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been led to Arlington by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man who was struggling financially at the time. More importantly, Willie pointed to the true architect of the tragedy, Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. Willie explained that Daphne was furious over the massive, unpaid debts owed to her by the family. She had approached Bobby Guillory, offering him $10,000 to carry out a dark deed to ensure she would collect her money. Through the couple's life insurance policies, Daphne had provided Bobby with a key to the apartment, which allowed the men to slip inside and stage the scene before the couple returned home. Chapter 6. The Verdict of Truth. Armed with this explosive information, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest Bobby Guillory. When confronted, Bobby confirmed his nephew's story, expressing deep remorse for his role in the crime. He admitted that they had been desperate for money and had allowed themselves to be used as pawns by Daphne Wright, whom he described as a ruthless, greedy mastermind who demanded her money at any cost. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. When asked how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment, Bobby stated that she had received it directly from Chow Tran himself. The revelation of Chow's complicity sent shockwaves through the department. The financial records subpoenaed by the state showed that shortly after tragedy, the sewing business had closed and Chow had purchased a beautiful new home. It became clear that Chow, trapped under the absolute spiritual and psychological control of Daphne, had agreed to a horrific arrangement. He claimed to his attorney that his mother-in-law, Hong, had offered herself as a sacrifice to save the family from Daphne's spiritual wrath. But investigators viewed this claim as an absurd attempt to justify a terrible betrayal driven by fear and financial greed. To secure a conviction against Daphne Wright, the individual who had orchestrated and funded the entire plot, prosecutors made a difficult choice. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, detailed testimony against the others. The trial began on August 26, year 2019. On the witness stand, Chow portrayed Daphne as an incredibly manipulative and commanding figure who ruled her clients with fear, using their deep cultural beliefs and spiritual curses to extort hundreds of thousands of dollars. Though the defense argued that Chow was the true beneficiary of the insurance money and was using Daphne as a scapegoat, the jury ultimately saw through the deception. In September of the year 2019, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory likewise faced the legal consequences of their actions. While the legal battle concluded with the mastermind behind bars, the heavy weight of the tragedy remained. For the investigators who had dedicated years to seeking justice for Long and Hong, the immunity granted to Chow Tran was a difficult pill to swallow. Yet, as the community looked back on the lives of the gentle elderly couple, they chose to remember them not by the darkness of their final moments, but by the warmth, love, and enduring spirit community they had brought with them across the sea. The story of their journey stood as a powerful reminder of the precious nature of family, the danger of unchecked greed, and the ultimate, inescapable power of truth to shine light into the deepest dark. In the quiet expanse of Tarrant County, Texas, the city of Arlington stands as a vibrant tapestry of cultures. By the late 20th century and into the early years of the 21st century, a flourishing Vietnamese immigrant community had woven its dreams into the very fabric of the city. Among those who arrived with hopes as vast as the Texas sky were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Le. They had immigrated from Vietnam in the year 2000, seeking what so many before them had sought, a peaceful, prosperous legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. They were a sweet, hard-working, and generous couple, beloved by their neighbors and deeply rooted in their cultural heritage. To build their piece of the American dream, they established a commercial sewing business, relying on the help of their family, including their articulate son-in-law, Chow Tran, who often served as the public face of the enterprise because of his strong command of the English language. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore fruit, culminating in a highly lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major commercial giant, a brand as universally recognized as Disney. Yet, as the year 2011 arrived, the tides of fortune began to shift. The contract was lost, and the family business began a slow, agonizing decline. Facing financial distress, the family turned to traditional beliefs in search of a solution. For thousands of years, many cultures have looked to spiritual practices to protect wealth and invite good fortune, desperate to lift what they feared was a persistent curse on their livelihood. Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Le, searched a local Vietnamese newspaper and discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based 250 miles away in Houston. Her name was Daphne Nguyen Wright, and she promised that she possessed a unique spiritual power to dispel negative energy, lift curses, and restore prosperity. Chow Tran made contact with Daphne, traveling to her Houston home for a consultation. There, she performed rituals meant to turn their fortunes around, leaving the family deeply hopeful that their dark days would soon be replaced by light. But behind the promise of spiritual sanctuary lay a web of insatiable greed. Over the course of a single year, instead of delivering good fortune, the arrangement spiraled into a devastating financial trap. Daphne began extending her services to the family on credit, and the debt quickly ballooned to an astronomical sum of somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. When the family found themselves utterly unable to pay, the spiritual advisor revealed a cold, predatory nature, learning that Chow Tran and his wife stood as the sole beneficiaries of substantial life insurance policies on the elderly couple, policies totaling at least $850,000. A dark plan began to take shape in the mind of the advisor. On the morning of June 10, 2012, at exactly 7:29 in the morning, emergency dispatchers in Arlington received a tense call from 38-year-old Chow Tran. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that his family had gathered outside their apartment and noticed an open window, with things inside appearing to be in complete disarray. Responding quickly to the call, Officer Weller arrived at the scene. It was unusually early for a welfare check, and the sight of an entire family waiting anxiously outside the apartment immediately struck the officer as out of the ordinary. Upon entering the residence, Officer Weller found the telltale signs of a robbery. Furniture was overturned, and compact discs were scattered across the floor, suggesting a chaotic search for valuables. Initially, the officer believed the home to be empty after a quick glance into the bedroom, but as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught the faint, chilling sight of hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. Hesitating for a moment, guided by a deep sense of duty, Officer Weller opened the closet door. Inside, he discovered the tragic bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been hog-tied with duct tape, their heads and mouths completely covered. The brutality of the scene was shocking, even to a seasoned police force. Arlington homicide investigators, including a veteran detective with 21 years of experience, were called to the scene. The physical evidence initially pointed toward gang activity: a light blue bandana, a color associated with local Vietnamese gangs, was found wrapped around a beer bottle, and a marijuana cigarette along with crushed prescription pills were left on a table as if to suggest a robbery carried out by reckless use. However, experienced detectives soon grew skeptical. The crime scene appeared almost too perfect, as if it had been deliberately staged to lead investigators down a false path. Swabs of blood, hair fibers, and DNA from a marijuana cigarette were collected and sent for analysis, but when the results returned, they did not match any profiles in the federal database. known as Cody's, nor did they match any family members. The case grew cold, remaining unresolved for over 3 years. The breakthrough came in October of the year 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory, who had been 16 years old at the time of the murders, was arrested on a felony charge of horse theft in Houston. Because a felony conviction requires a DNA profile to be entered into a national database, Willie's genetic information was finally uploaded. Instantly, the system signaled a perfect match to the DNA found on the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene in 212. Arlington detectives acted swiftly, arresting Willie Guillory. Under questioning, the young man broke down and confessed, revealing that he had not acted alone. He had been accompanied by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, a man who had no prior criminal record but was facing severe financial desperation after being laid off from his job. Bobby had been offered $10,000 by Daphne Wright to carry out the attack on the elderly. Couple, Daphne, acting as a spiritual loan shark, had demanded the deaths of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu so that the family could collect on the life, insurance policies, and pay off their massive debt to her. Most shocking of all was the revelation of how the killers had gained access to the apartment. Daphne had provided them with a key, which she had obtained directly from Chow Tran. In December of 2015, detectives located and arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, Bobby also confessed, confirming that Daphne Wright was a mastermind who had orchestrated the entire plot. In August of 2016, investigators secured an arrest warrant for Daphne Wright. A search of her Houston home uncovered detailed ledgers documenting the exorbitant fees she charged her clients for spiritual services, with individual entries ranging from $10,000 to $40,000. To secure a conviction against the primary instigator of the crime, prosecutors made a difficult decision to offer immunity to Chow Tran in exchange for his full testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a ruthlessly greedy woman who held a powerful psychological grip over his family. The defense argued passionately that Chow was a complicit partner who sought to pocket the $150,000 in insurance payouts for himself, highlighting the complete lack of written documentation regarding the alleged $280,000 debt. In September of 2019, the jury reached its verdict. Daphne Nguyen Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although the veteran investigators expressed deep frustration that Chow Tran escaped criminal prosecution due to his immunity agreement, they remained steadfast in their belief that truth and justice eventually prevail. The resolution of the case brought a solemn peace to the community, serving as a lasting testament to the tireless dedication of the investigators who refused to let a terrible wrong remain in the dark. The morning sun over Texas has a way of turning the vast, flat landscape into a canvas of bright gold and soft amber. In the city of Arlington, where the modern world blends seamlessly with the rich traditions of diverse cultures, the day usually begins with a quiet, predictable rhythm. Neighbors greet each other across neatly manicured lawns. The hum of early morning traffic plays a steady bass line in the distance, and the sweet scent of jasmine tea drifts from the open windows of family homes. For many years, this neighborhood had been a sanctuary of hope and new beginnings. It was a place where dreams were not just chased, but meticulously crafted, stitch by stitch, through hard work and unwavering faith. Among those who had woven their lives into the very fabric of this community were an elderly couple, whose love story was legendary among those who knew them. Chapter 1, A Legacy Built on Love. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu arrived in the United States in the year 2000, carrying with them little more than a few suitcases, a profound devotion to one another, and an enduring dream for their children and grandchildren. They had spent the first half of their lives in Vietnam, navigating the changing tides of history with grace and resilience. when they chose to settle in Arlington, Texas. They did so because they saw a thriving community where their heritage would be respected and their family could flourish. Long was a man of quiet dignity, with laugh lines etched deeply around his eyes, testifying to a lifetime of finding humor in the simplest of moments. He possessed an innate ability to make anyone feel at ease, often sharing gentle jokes and stories of his youth over cups of hot tea. Hong was his perfect counterpart. She was a woman of immense warmth and boundless energy, whose hands were rarely still. Whether she was tending to her garden, preparing a feast for her family, or guiding a needle with absolute precision, she did everything with a spirit of generosity. To watch them together was to witness a masterclass in partnership. They had been married for several decades, yet they still looked at each other with the same tenderness they had shared as young lovers. If Long was the steady anchor of the family, Hong was the sail, always pushing them forward toward new horizons. In Arlington, they established a commercial sewing business, a venture that quickly became a labor of love for the entire household. It was a modest enterprise at first, operating out of a small space filled with a rhythmic, comforting hum of industrial sewing machines. They specialized in creating beautifully crafted garments, and before long, their reputation for quality and reliability caught the attention of major distributors. To help manage the growing business, they enlisted the support of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old immigrant who possessed a strong command of the English language. Chow became the public face of the company, handling negotiations, communicating with contractors, and managing the day-to-day administrative tasks. For nearly a decade, the business thrived, securing contracts with prominent entertainment giants, including a lucrative arrangement to produce specialty items for Disney. During these prosperous years, the family home was a hub of laughter and celebration. Sunday dinners were a sacred tradition, where 3 generations would gather around a long wooden table laden with traditional Vietnamese dishes. Long would often raise a glass, his face glowing with pride. As he looked at his children and grandchildren, he would remind them that their success was not measured by the balance in their bank accounts, but by the love they shared and the integrity with which they lived their lives. Chapter 2: The Changing Winds. By the year 2011, however, the economic landscape began to shift. The highly coveted contract with the entertainment giant was lost, and the steady stream of orders that had once kept the sewing machines humming day and night began to dwindle. The sudden downturn cast a shadow of worry over the household. Long and Hong, ever resilient, tried to maintain an atmosphere of optimism, reminding their family that seasons of struggle were natural and that they had survived far worse trials in the past. Yet, as the financial pressures mounted, the family began to look for ways to restore their good fortune. In many traditional cultures, when hard work and practical effort seemed to fail, people turned to the spiritual realm for guidance and protection. For centuries, many have believed in the power of spiritual advisors to help clear away obstacles, lift perceived curses, and invite blessings of prosperity back into a home. It was during this period of uncertainty that Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong, began searching for a spiritual solution to their business troubles. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, they came across an advertisement for a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advertisement promised that she possessed a unique ability to remove negative energy, lift ancestral curses, and restore harmony and abundance to struggling businesses. Hoping to find a turning point for their beloved sewing business, Chow contacted Daphne and arranged for a consultation. Soon after, Chow and Hong traveled to Houston to meet with her. Daphne, a charismatic and direct woman, performed a series of traditional rituals designed to cleanse their business of bad luck. For a time, the family felt a renewed sense of hope. They returned to Arlington believing that the dark clouds would soon part and their sewing machines would once again sing with productivity. But as the months passed, the business did not recover. Instead of adapting to the new market realities, they found themselves slipping deeper into a financial entanglement with their spiritual advisor, whose fees for ongoing rituals and protective measures began to escalate dramatically. Chapter 3: The Dedicated Seekers of Justice. In the early morning hours of June 10th, the peaceful silence of the Arlington neighborhood was broken by a call to emergency services. Chow Tran requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, expressing deep concern that they were not answering their door and that their apartment appeared to be in disarray. When the responding officers arrived, they found the family gathered outside, filled with anxiety. The primary responding officer, a dedicated public servant with 14 years of experience, immediately sensed that this was no ordinary welfare check. The open window and the quiet stillness of the residence suggested that something was profoundly wrong. Upon entering the apartment, the officers discovered that a terrible tragedy had occurred. Long and Hong had been victims of a senseless and brutal act of violence. The home had been staged to look like a burglary gone wrong, complete with scattered belongings and items associated with local gang activity left behind as a false trail. For the veteran homicide investigators of the Arlington Police Department, the loss of this gentle, well-loved elderly couple was a deeply felt blow. The lead detective, a man who had dedicated 21 years of his life to investigating homicides, felt a profound responsibility to find the truth. He knew that Long and Hong had no enemies. They were cherished members of the community who had spent their lives helping others. The initial clues seemed almost too convenient. A light blue bandana wrapped around a beverage bottle was left in a prominent position, seemingly pointing toward local gangs. However, the seasoned investigators remained skeptical. Experienced detectives know that when a crime scene appears too perfect, it is often because someone has gone to great lengths to stage it. The investigators began a meticulous, exhaustive search for answers. They interviewed family members, spoke with neighbors, and collected physical evidence from the scene. They recovered genetic material from a cigarette left behind, hoping it would lead them to a suspect. Yet, when the samples were run to the national database, there were no matches. The case, despite the relentless efforts of the police, eventually went cold for 2 years. But true justice is a patient force, and the detectives refused to let the memory of Long and Hong fade into the past. Chapter 4: The Unraveling Thread. The breakthrough came in the autumn of the year 2015, proving that even the smallest, seemingly unrelated events can bring the truth to light. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for an unrelated offense. Because he had recently reached adulthood and was facing a felony charge, his genetic profile was entered into the national database for the first time. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match between Willie's genetic material and the evidence recovered from the Arlington crime scene 3 years prior. The Arlington detectives immediately traveled to interview the young man. When faced with the scientific evidence, the weight of his past actions became too heavy to bear. Willie broke down and confessed, explaining that he had been only 16 years old at the time of the incident and had been led astray by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie revealed that they had been hired to carry out the act by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. According to Willie, Daphne claimed that the elderly couple owed her a massive sum of money, somewhere between $200,000 and $50,000 and $280,000 for her spiritual services. When the family was unable to pay, Daphne's greed consumed her, and she sought to collect on the substantial life insurance policies held by the couple. Armed with this critical information, the detectives moved swiftly to arrest Bobby Guillory. Bobby, who had no prior criminal history, also confessed, confirming that Daphne had orchestrated the entire plan, promising him $10,000 to assist in the crime. As the investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a complex web of manipulation and misplaced trust. Daphne had built a lucrative business by preying on the fears and cultural beliefs of vulnerable families, charging tens of thousands of dollars for rituals. When her clients fell into deep debt, she used her perceived spiritual powers to control and intimidate them. The investigation ultimately revealed that Chow Tran had also become deeply entangled in Daphne's web. Terrified of the spiritual consequences of failing to pay her, and desperate to resolve the family's financial ruin, Chow had ultimately compromised his integrity, providing the key to the apartment under the belief that a tragic solution was the only way to satisfy the debt and protect his family from a spiritual curse. Chapter 5. The Triumph of Truth in Community. The trial of Daphne Wright in August of the year 2019 was a solemn and powerful moment for the Arlington community. It was a time of reckoning, where the deceptive practices of a manipulative individual were laid bare before the court of law. Chow Tran, having cooperated with the prosecution, provided crucial testimony that described how Daphne had used fear and psychological manipulation to control his mind and his family's actions. The defense argued that Chow was also complicit, but the jury focused on the mastermind who had directed the tragedy from behind the scenes. After a detailed presentation of the evidence, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the legal consequences of their actions, ensuring that all those who played a part in conspiracy were held accountable. While the legal process brought a sense of closure, the true healing for the Arlington community came from remembering the beautiful lives of Long, Gwen, and Hong Lu. Their legacy was not defined by the tragic manner of their passing, but by the 20 years of love, kindness, and dedication they had poured into their family and their adopted home. The story of Long and Hong serves as an inspiring reminder of the power of community, the importance of protecting the vulnerable, and the enduring strength of love over greed. In the neighborhood where they once lived, the hum of sewing machines can still be heard from time to time, a comforting sound that reminds everyone of a couple who arrived with a dream and left behind a legacy of warmth, resilience, and hope. The morning sun in the state of Texas has a way of stretching across the flat, wide horizon like a warm, golden hand. It rises over the pine trees of the east and spills across the concrete ribbons of the highways, warming the brick-and-mortar homes of Arlington, a city nestled comfortably between the bustling hubs of Dallas and Fort Worth. In this place, where the wind smells of dry grass and distant barbecue smoke, thousands of families from all corners of the globe had come to plant their seeds, hoping the soil of the American dream would be kind to them. Among those who had crossed the vast, blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean were Long Nguyen and his devoted wife, Hong Lu. They were a couple who carried the quiet dignity of their homeland, Vietnam, in the very way they walked, spoke, and smiled. In the year 2000, when the world was celebrating the dawn of a new millennium, Long and Hong had packed their lives into a few suitcases, holding tight the hands of their children and grandchildren. They did not come with gold or grand promises, but they possessed an inexhaustible reservoir of determination, a deep love for one another, and a shared vision of a peaceful life where their descendants could flourish. Arlington, with its large, vibrant, and welcoming Vietnamese community, felt like the perfect sanctuary. It was a place where one could buy fresh ginger and jasmine rice at the local markets, hear the familiar melodic tones of their native tongue spoken on the streets, and yet still look up to see the broad, blue Texas sky. To build their legacy, Long and Hong did what they knew best. They possessed an extraordinary talent for craftsmanship, a precise and artistic understanding of fabric, thread, and needle. With the help of their family, they established a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, housed in a bright space filled with a rhythmic, comforting hum of sewing machines. The air was always thick with the scent of fresh cotton and the steam from heavy industrial irons. To bridge the gap between their traditional ways and the fast-paced American business world, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was a young man of 38 years, energetic, eager to please, and blessed with a quick, friendly English vocabulary that made him the natural public face of the enterprise. Chow loved his family deeply. He took immense pride in walking into the offices of large commercial contractors, shaking hands with American executives, and negotiating deals that kept the family machines humming. For nearly 10 years, their hard work paid off in ways they had only dared to imagine in their quietest dreams. The pinnacle of their success arrived when they secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global commercial giant, none other than the legendary Disney enterprise. For a time, their workshop was filled with the bright, cheerful colors of beloved cartoon characters, and the future seemed as bright and secure as a summer day. Yet, as the wheel of fortune turns, the bright days eventually gave way to a season of shadow. By the year 2011, the global economy had shifted, contracts grew scarce, and the cherished agreement with the giant enterprise slipped through their fingers. The sewing machines, once a chorus of prosperity, fell silent one by one. The bills began to pile up on the kitchen table like dry leaves in autumn. For Long and Hong, who had survived wars and the monumental struggle of migration, this financial strain was not merely a matter of numbers. It felt like a spiritual weight, an invisible cloud of bad luck that had settled over their household. In traditional Asian culture, when hard work and practical effort seem to fail, it is natural to look beyond the physical world for answers. For thousands of years, people have believed in the delicate balance of spiritual energies, in the protective power of ancestral blessings, and the existence of unseen forces that can influence a person's destiny. Long and Hong, steeped in the mysticism of their homeland, became convinced that their business was not merely suffering from market downturns, but was under the heavy shadow of a curse. They felt they needed a spiritual protector, someone who could realign their fortunes and restore the harmony they had lost. It was during a quiet afternoon, while searching to the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper, that Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong, discovered an advertisement that seemed to promise a beacon of hope. The advertisement belonged to a spiritual advisor named Daphne Wright, who operated her practice some 250 miles away in the sprawling coastal city of Houston. Daphne advertised herself as a powerful medium, a woman capable of lifting the most stubborn of curses, invoking good fortune, and shielding families from spiritual harm. Her words held a magnetic appeal for a family standing on the precipice of financial ruin. Encouraged by Hong's deep faith, Chow made the long drive to Houston to seek a consultation. In a quiet neighborhood, they met Daphne, a woman of 44 years who carried herself with an immense, commanding presence. Daphne was married to a quiet man named Howard and was the mother of 3 daughters. In her home, she was the absolute center of gravity, loud, direct, and completely in control. To Chow and Hong, she appeared to be a figure of monumental authority, someone who possessed the keys to the spiritual realm. Daphne performed an elaborate ritual, burning sweet incense, chanting ancient prayers, and promising that the dark clouds hanging over their sewing business would soon scatter. The family returned to Arlington filled with a renewed sense of hope, believing their investment in faith would soon bear fruit. However, the spiritual assistance did not come without a price. What began as a simple consultation soon transformed into a complex web of financial demands. Daphne explained that the curse on their business was exceptionally deep and stubborn, requiring more elaborate, more frequent, and far more expensive rituals to dissolve. Desperate to keep their American dream alive, and terrified of the spiritual consequences of stopping the ceremonies, the family began to pour their remaining savings into Daphne's hands. As the months stretched into the year 2012, the sewing business did not recover. Instead of stepping back, Chow and Hong found themselves trapped in a psychological cage. They believed that if they stopped paying, the spiritual advisor would turn her formidable powers against them, transforming her protective prayers into a devastating curse. Daphne, sensing their absolute vulnerability, began to run her services on credit. The debt ballooned rapidly, climbing to a staggering sum between $250,000 and $280,000. It was a phantom debt, documented nowhere but in the ledger of their own fear. To pay this impossible sum, a dark and tragic idea began to take root. Daphne, well aware that the family possessed substantial life insurance policies worth at least $1 million, suggested a terrible solution. If the elderly couple were to pass away, the insurance payout would easily clear the debt and secure the family's future. In the twisted logic of desperation and spiritual manipulation, the line between faith and greed became fatally blurred. On the morning of June Muoy, 2012, the quiet neighborhood of Arlington was shattered when Chow Tran called emergency dispatchers, requesting a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He explained to the operator, in a voice tight with anxiety, that his family had gone to the apartment and noticed an open window, with things inside appearing to be in complete disarray. Terrified of what they might find, they waited outside for the arrival of the police. When Officer Weller, a dedicated public servant, arrived at the apartment, he immediately sensed that this was no ordinary call. The morning was exceptionally early, a time when the neighborhood was usually wrapped in peaceful silence. Upon entering the residence, Weller observed the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered across the floor, and the living room was in complete disarray. He called out, his voice echoing off the walls, but received no response. He checked the kitchen and the bathroom, finding them empty. Finally, he turned his attention to the master bedroom. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty, and Weller felt a brief sense of relief, imagining the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool Texas air. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight beam caught a series of dark hand smudges on the wall next to a remarkably small closet. A cold instinct, born of years on the beat, urged him to pause. He opened the closet door, and the reality of human cruelty laid itself bare. Inside the cramped space lay Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been bound tightly, their heads and mouths covered, and they had tragically succumbed to suffocation. The shock of the discovery sent waves of grief and disbelief through the Arlington Police Department. Homicide detectives, including seasoned veterans with over 21 years of experience, arrived at the scene. They were met with a baffling array of clues. On the coffee table lay a plate of crushed prescription pills and a marijuana cigarette. Wrapped around a nearby beer bottle was a light-colored blue bandana. To the detectives, these items looked like the distinct calling cards of an active local gang, a sign that perhaps a robbery had gone terribly wrong. Yet, as the investigation unfolded, the experienced detectives began to harbor doubts. The scene felt too perfect, too deliberately staged to point the finger at local street youth. It was as if someone had read a manual on gang activity and tried to recreate it in the apartment. They carefully collected every piece of evidence, including the genetic profiles from the marijuana cigarette, hoping the national database, known as a combined deoxyribonucleic acid index system, would yield a match. But the results returned empty, suggesting the perpetrator had no prior felony convictions. For 3 long years, the case remained cold, a solemn shadow over the Arlington community. The memory of the sweet, hard-working couple who had only ever wanted to build a good life for their family kept the detectives searching for answers. Then, in the year 2015, the wheel of justice turned once more in the most unexpected way. In a neighboring county, a young man named Willie Guillory, who was 16 years old at the time of the tragedy, was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because he had transitioned into adulthood and was convicted of a felony, his genetic profile was entered into the national database. Within days, the computer system signaled a perfect match. The genetic material left on the staged marijuana cigarette at the crime scene in 212 belonged to Willie Guillory. When detectives brought Willie in for questioning, the weight of his conscience proved too heavy to bear. He broke down in tears, confessing that he'd been brought along by his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man who had been struggling financially after being laid off from his job. Bobby had been recruited by Daphne Wright, who promised him the sum of $10,000 to carry out the deed. Daphne, the spiritual advisor, wanted her money, and she had orchestrated the entire plot to collect on the family's life insurance policies. Bobby Guillory was soon arrested, and he too confessed, revealing the shocking depth of the betrayal. He claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided by none other than Chow Tran himself, who had left it under a welcome mat. The web of spiritual manipulation, greed, and desperation had led to an unspeakable tragedy. To secure a conviction against the mastermind, prosecutors made a difficult decision, offering Chow Tran immunity in exchange for his full and truthful testimony. On August 26, 2000 Muoy Chin, the trial of Daphne Wright began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a powerful, greedy woman who had used her spiritual influence to control his mind and dominate his family. The defense argued fiercely that Chow was a complicit actor who had sought the $850,000 insurance payout for his own gain, but the jury ultimately focused on the architect of the crime. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would never again exploit the faith of vulnerable families. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the consequences of their actions, while the community of Arlington began the long, quiet process of healing. Though the road to justice was long and filled with sorrow, it served as a powerful reminder of the resilience of love, the importance of truth, and the enduring strength of a community united against greed. The morning sun of Texas has a way of climbing over the horizon like a slow, heavy wave of gold, spreading its warmth across the quiet suburbs of Arlington. In the early hours of June 10, 2012, the streets were mostly silent, save for the occasional chirp of a morning bird or the distant hum of a passing delivery truck. It was a day that began with a sense of peace, a day that promised the quiet rhythms of summer. Yet, beneath the surface of this tranquil neighborhood, a deeply unsettling mystery was about to unfold, one that would challenge a veteran police force, test the bonds of a hard-working immigrant family, and ultimately remind everyone of the delicate balance between hope, desperation, and the pursuit of truth. To understand the story that transpired in Arlington, one must first look back to the turn of the century, to the year 2000, when an elderly couple named Long Nguyen and Hong Le made a monumental decision. They chose to leave behind the familiar landscapes of Vietnam, packing up their dreams and their cherished memories to cross the ocean. They brought with them their 3 adult children and their grandchildren, seeking what so many before them had sought, the American dream. Arlington, a vibrant city nestled within Tarrant County, welcomed them with its broad streets and diverse communities. Over the decades, especially after the historic events of 1975, Arlington had become a sanctuary for a large, thriving Vietnamese community. Families who had traveled across the world found comfort in building a new life together here, blending their deep-rooted cultural heritage with the dynamic opportunities of American commerce. They established businesses, built community centers, and raised children who spoke fluent English while still honoring the traditions of their elders. Long and Hong were a beloved part of this community. Neighbors knew them as a kind, gentle couple who never bothered anyone. They were hard-working and generous, always ready with a warm smile or a helpful gesture. To look at them was to see the very picture of resilience. Upon settling in Texas, they established a commercial sewing business. To help bridge the cultural and linguistic gap, they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a sharp 38-year-old immigrant who spoke excellent English. Chow became the public face of the enterprise, negotiating contracts, talking to suppliers, and handling the complex paperwork of American business. For nearly a decade, their efforts bore sweet fruit. The hum of sewing machines in their workshop was the sound of progress. They secured lucrative contracts, including prestigious agreements to manufacture garments for major commercial giants, even producing items for global brands like Disney. They were a prominent family, respected and admired. However, by the year 2011, the winds of fortune began to shift. Global markets fluctuated, contracts were lost, and the steady stream of income that had sustained the family began to dry up. The loss of the Disney contract was a particularly heavy blow. The sewing machines grew quiet, and anxiety settled over the household like persistent fog. In times of deep financial distress, people often look backward to find a path forward, searching for answers in the spiritual traditions of their ancestors. In many traditional Asian cultures, there is a deep belief in the ebb and flow of cosmic luck. For thousands of years, people have prayed to the lucky gods and protectors of wealth to guard their businesses and bring prosperity. When a family faces an overwhelming crisis, such as impending bankruptcy or legal trouble, they may seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These advisors are believed to possess the rare ability to lift curses, restore harmony, and heal the invisible rifts that block the flow of good fortune. Desperate to save the family legacy, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, began searching for a spiritual solution. In the pages of a local Vietnamese newspaper, they discovered an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, some 250 miles away. Her name was Daphne Wright. She claimed to possess the power to lift dark curses, invite prosperity, and alter the course of destiny. To a family standing on the precipice of financial ruin, her promises sounded like a lifeline. Chow contacted Daphne, and she agreed to meet him at her Houston home for a consultation. The family placed their ultimate trust in her, hoping that through ancient rituals and spiritual intervention, their business would once again thrive. They could not have known that this search for a spiritual savior would slowly entangle them in a web of greed, manipulation, and tragedy. 1 year later, on the morning of June 10, 2012, at 7:29 in the morning, the peace of Arlington was shattered. Chow Tran placed an urgent call to emergency dispatchers, requesting a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. He explained to the dispatcher that his family had gathered outside the apartment of 70-something Long Nguyen and his wife Hong Lu. They had knocked on the door, but there was no answer. His teenage son had peeked through a window and noticed that things inside looked incomplete. Disarray, terrified of what they might find, the family waited outside for the authorities to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, was the first to arrive on the scene. He noted that the gathering of an entire family outside an apartment so early in the morning was highly unusual for a typical welfare check. Walking up to the residence, he saw the open window and the signs of a potential break-in. Upon entering the apartment, the scene appeared to confirm a burglary gone wrong. Furniture was overturned, and compact discs were scattered across the floor, as if someone had ransacked the living room in a frantic search for valuables. Officer Weller called out, his voice echoing through the silent rooms, but no one answered. The kitchen was empty, the bathroom was clear. The only room left to check was the bedroom. Officer Weller stepped inside. At first glance, the bedroom appeared empty. He began to turn around, ready to tell the waiting family that their loved ones were not there, when his flashlight illuminated the wall next to a small closet. There, clear as day, were dark smudges on the plaster, as if someone had desperately grabbed the wall. A heavy silence filled the room. An instinct, honed by years of police work, warned him that something was terribly wrong. Slowly, he reached out and opened the closet door. Inside, hidden away in the dark, lay the motionless bodies of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been bound with duct tape, their heads and mouths heavily wrapped. The sheer brutality of the scene left the experienced officer in absolute shock. He walked out of the bedroom, unable to speak or even use his radio for several long moments, before finally composing himself to request a supervisor and a crime scene unit. Detective Stuart, a veteran homicide investigator with 21 years on the force, soon arrived at the apartment. Even for him, this was one of the most devastating and violent crime scenes he had ever witnessed. It was clear that a terrible struggle had taken place near the front entrance, with blood transfer on the walls and carpet, indicating the victims had been attacked the moment they stepped through their door. On the coffee table, investigators found unusual items: a plate of crushed prescription pills and a discarded marijuana cigarette, alongside a blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. To the detectives, these items look almost like a calling card left by one of the active Vietnamese street gangs, known to operate in the area. These gangs were notorious for extorting local businesses, and at first, it seemed the family had fallen victim to a violent extortion plot. Yet, as Detective Stuart examined the scene more closely, a sense of skepticism began to take root. In his decades of investigating homicides, he knew that real gang violence rarely left such convenient, perfectly placed clues. The scene felt staged, as if someone had gone to great lengths to paint a picture of gang activity to steer investigators down a false path. The next step was to interview the grieving family. Chow Tran, being the primary English speaker, met with Detective Stuart. He explained that the night before, the entire family had gathered to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. Long and Hong had stayed at the party until 10 o'clock in the evening, after which another family member had driven them home. That was the last time they were seen alive. Chow mentioned that while the family's sewing business had been struggling, he could not think of anyone who would want to harm the gentle couple. An autopsy conducted the following day at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office revealed a heartbreaking truth. While the victims had suffered blunt force injuries, their actual cause of death was suffocation due to layers of duct tape wrapped tightly around their faces. It was a slow, incredibly painful way to pass, suggesting a level of cruelty that felt deeply personal. As the investigation progressed, a surprising call from an insurance company changed the entire trajectory of the case. The representative informed Detective Stuart that Long and Hong carried a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million. When the detective inquired about the beneficiaries, one name stood out: Chow Tran. Detectives brought Chow in for further questioning on June 13, 2012. Chow was entirely cooperative, explaining that the policy was intended to ensure the survival of the family business should anything happened to the elders. He provided an airtight alibi for himself and the rest of the family, explaining that they had been playing cards together until late into the night. To verify his story, police collected DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and other relatives, comparing them to the evidence found at the crime scene. A distinct DNA profile was successfully extracted from the discarded marijuana cigarette. Investigators hoped this would lead them directly to the killer. However, when the results came back from the national database, there was no match. The DNA did not belong to any family member, nor did it match any known offenders in the federal system. The investigation slowly ground to a halt. For 2 long years, no new leads materialized, and the case of the gentle sewing business owners grew cold. The detectives, however, refused to forget the quiet couple who had traveled so far only to meet such a tragic end. The breakthrough came in the autumn of 2015, through an entirely unexpected turn of events. A 16-year-old youth named Willie Guillory had been arrested for a felony horse theft in Houston because he was a minor at the time of the 2012 murders. His DNA had never been entered into the national database. But now, as an adult with a felony conviction, his genetic profile was uploaded into the system. Almost immediately, the computer flagged a perfect match. The DNA on the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, detectives arrested Willie on a parole violation and brought him into the interrogation room. confronted with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment. The young man broke down in tears. He confessed to his presence at the scene, but insisted he was merely a pawn. He had been brought along by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, to assist with what he believed was a simple burglary. According to Willie, his Uncle Bobby had been given a key to the apartment to make the break-in look authentic. They had intentionally thrown items around, left the blue bandana, the beer bottle, and the crushed pills to stage a gang-related robbery. When the elderly couple returned home unexpectedly, the situation escalated into violence. After incapacitating the couple, Bobby and Willie bound them with duct tape and placed them in the closet before fleeing back to Houston. When asked why they would target a couple they did not even know, Willie revealed a shocking detail. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by a woman named Daphne Wright. The very spiritual advisor family had hired years before. Willie explained that Daphne had claimed the couple owed her an enormous sum of money and that she wanted them dead if they did not pay. Armed with this revelation, the focus of the investigation shifted to Daphne Wright. Detectives discovered that her spiritual practice was highly lucrative, charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for rituals. When they attempted to speak with Chow Tran about a connection to Daphne, Chow suddenly refused to speak without his attorney present. On December 16, 2015, police arrested Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Facing capital murder charges, Bobby also confessed, pointing the finger directly at Daphne. He explained that he had been in desperate financial straits after being laid off and that Daphne had offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed. Bobby revealed that Chow and Hong had run up a massive debt with Daphne for her spiritual services, a sum ballooning to between $250,000 and $280,000 because they could not pay. Daphne had devised a plan to collect on the couple's life insurance policies. Most shocking of all, Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been provided by Chow Tran himself. Detectives traveled to Houston to arrest Daphne Wright. A search of her home revealed detailed ledgers listing extraordinary fees for her spiritual services, confirming the massive scale of her financial exploitation. In exchange for his full testimony against Daphne and Bobby, prosecutors offered Chow Tran immunity. It was a difficult decision, a deal with the devil, but necessary to secure a conviction against the true mastermind of the conspiracy. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He painted a picture of a family entirely dominated by fear of Daphne's alleged spiritual powers, claiming they believed she could place a devastating curse on their children if they failed to pay. He even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could use the insurance money to clear their spiritual debt. The defense strongly contested this, arguing that Chow had orchestrated the plot out of pure financial greed to pocket the substantial insurance payout. In September of 2019, the jury reached its verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Guillory also received a life sentence for his role in the crime. While the legal proceedings came to a close, the story left a lasting impression on the community of Arlington. It stood as a somber reminder of the dangers of extreme desperation and the tragic consequences of placing blind faith in those who prey on the vulnerable. Yet, in the quiet neighborhood where the sewing machines once hummed, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu endured, not for the tragedy that befell them, but for the decades of love, hard work, and dedication they poured into building a beautiful life for the family they cherished above all else. The morning air in Arlington, Texas, was usually heavy with the promise of summer heat. But on the 10th of June in the year 2012, there was a strange, quiet stillness that hung over the neighborhood. The city of Arlington had grown over the decades into a vibrant tapestry of cultures, home to a large and close-knit Vietnamese community that had flourished since the late 1900s. 70s. Among them were families who had built their lives from the ground up, bringing with them their cherished traditions, their culinary secrets, and an unwavering belief in the power of hard work and family unity. At 7:29 in the morning, the calm of the day was gently broken by a phone call to the emergency dispatchers. On the other end of the line was Chow Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant who worked tirelessly to support his family. His voice, though trying to remain calm, carried an undercurrent of deep concern. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. The dispatcher, speaking with a steady, reassuring tone characteristic of emergency professionals, asked for the names of the individuals in question. Chow carefully spelled them out, explaining that his father-in-law was named Long Nguyen and was currently in his 70s. As Chow spoke, his anxiety seemed to mount. He explained to the dispatcher that his wife, his son, and he had gone to the residence to check on them, only to find that things were not as they should be. They had noticed that a window to the apartment was wide open, and the general state of the exterior looked highly unusual. Too terrified to step inside the dark, quiet apartment themselves, the family gathered on the manicured lawn outside, waiting anxiously for the arrival of the police. It was an unusual sight for that time of morning. When Officer Weller arrived on the scene, he immediately sensed that this was not a routine welfare check. Normally, requests to check on the well-being of citizens came later in the day, and they rarely involved an entire family standing outside in a state of quiet panic. Officer Weller, a seasoned veteran of the force with 14 years of experience, walked up to the family. He offered them a reassuring smile, hoping to ease their worries. He then turned his attention to the apartment. As he crossed the threshold, the silence inside was heavy. He began to call out, his voice echoing softly against the walls, but there was no answer. The living room was in complete disarray, displaying all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, compact discs were scattered across the floor, and furniture was moved out of place. Officer Weller checked the kitchen and the bathroom, finding both empty. He then proceeded to the master bedroom. Initially, the room appeared vacant. He turned around, preparing to leave the apartment to inform the family that no one was inside and perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk in the park. However, as he reached the bedroom doorway, the beam of his flashlight caught something unusual. On the wall next to a very small, inconspicuous closet, there were faint hand smudges. It was a detail that a less experienced eye might have missed, but Weller hesitated. A quiet instinct told him that something was not right. Steeling himself, he turned back and slowly opened the small closet door. Inside, the officer's heart sank. He discovered the elderly couple, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They were bound tightly with heavy duct tape, and their heads and mouths were fully covered. There was no life left in them. The scene was incredibly difficult for the veteran officer to process. For a moment, the weight of the tragedy left him unable to speak or even use his radio. He walked back into the center of the living room, standing in silence as he gathered his thoughts, before finally calling for his supervisor and the crime scene unit. When the Arlington homicide investigators arrived, led by Detective Stuart, they were equally struck by the gravity of the scene. Detective Stuart had spent 21 years in the homicide department, witnessing many challenging cases, but this one felt deeply personal and unnecessarily cruel. The initial evidence pointed toward a robbery gone wrong, but the sheer level of violence and the careful way the scene was arranged made the detectives highly skeptical. As the crime scene technicians began their meticulous work, they discovered several items that felt almost too convenient for a standard robbery. On the coffee table lay a plate with crushed prescription pills, and nearby was a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle. To some, this would immediately suggest local gang activity, as light blue was a color associated with certain active groups in the area. However, Detective Stuart and his team knew that real gang members rarely left such obvious, stylized calling cards at a crime scene. It felt staged, like a scene from a television show designed to point investigators in the wrong direction. The detectives decided to treat the gang theory with caution while they waited for forensic laboratory to process the physical evidence, including the hair fibers, the duct tape, and the biological samples from a marijuana cigarette. To understand why anyone would want to harm such a gentle couple, the investigators turned to the community. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were beloved figures in the Arlington Vietnamese neighborhood. Having immigrated to the United States in the year 2000, they had spent over a decade building a beautiful life. They had established a commercial sewing business, employing several family members, and eventually securing a major contract to manufacture garments for a prominent entertainment giant. Chow Tran, the son-in-law, had been the public face of the sewing business because his English was the most fluent. He was known as a hard-working family man who cared deeply for his in-laws. However, by the year 2011, the family's business faced severe challenges. They lost their primary contract, and the business began to decline rapidly. In their search for a solution to their financial worries, the family looked to the traditional beliefs of their homeland. In many traditional cultures, when a family experiences a sudden turn of misfortune, they may believe that a spiritual cloud or a curse has settled over them. To lift this perceived burden, people sometimes seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, searched through local Vietnamese publications and found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor based in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove bad luck and bring prosperity back to struggling families. Hoping to restore their family legacy, Chow contacted Daphne and arranged a meeting at her Houston home. Over the course of many months, the family became deeply dependent on her rituals. What began as a simple consultation soon spiraled into a complex web of financial obligations. Because the business did not recover, the family continued to request more intensive rituals, which Daphne happily provided on credit. Over time, the debt ballooned to an astronomical sum, somewhere between $250,000 and $280,000. As the investigation continued into the summer of 2012, the detectives discovered that the deceased couple held a very substantial life insurance policy, valued at approximately $1 million. When Detective Stuart inquired about the beneficiaries, he learned that Chow Tran was one of the primary recipients. When interviewed, Chow explained that the policy was designed to ensure the survival of the family business in the event of tragedy. He and his family provided a detailed, consistent timeline of their whereabouts on the night of the incident, explaining they had been celebrating Long's birthday at a family gathering until late in the evening. With no direct evidence linking Chow or any other family member to the crime scene, and with the laboratory reports showing that the biological samples from the marijuana cigarette did not match anyone in the national database, the case slowly went cold. For over 2 years, the file sat on Detective Stewart's desk, a quiet reminder of an unsolved mystery. Then, in the year 2015, a sudden breakthrough occurred. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because he was now an adult facing a felony charge, his biological profile was entered into the national database within days. The system flagged a perfect match between Willie's profile and the biological material recovered from the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene in 2012. On the 17th of October in 2015, Willie Guillory was brought in for questioning. When confronted with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had been only 16 years old at the time of the incident and had been led into the situation by his uncle, Bobby Guillory. Willie explained that his uncle Bobby had been struggling financially after being laid off from his job, Bobby had been approached by Daphne Wright, who was a close acquaintance. Daphne had complained that a family in Arlington owed her a significant amount of money and refused to pay. She offered Bobby $10,000 to travel to Arlington and handle the situation. According to Willie, Daphne had even provided them with a key to the apartment, so they could enter without forcing the door, instructing them to stage the scene to look like a random burglary. With this crucial information, the police arrested Bobby Guillory on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the confession of his nephew and the progress of the investigation, Bobby also confessed. He confirmed that Daphne Wright was a mastermind behind the entire plot. He explained that Daphne had discovered the existence of the large life insurance policies and realized that the only way she would ever recover her $280,000 was if the couple passed away, allowing Chow to collect the insurance money and settle the debt. The most shocking revelation came when Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had been placed under a doormat by Chow Tran himself, under instructions from Daphne. When detectives attempted to speak with Chow again, he immediately referred them to his legal representative. In August of 2016, the police arrested Daphne Wright at her Houston home. A search of her residence revealed detailed ledger books documenting that she had charged various clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services. To secure a conviction against Daphne, whom prosecutors believed was the true puppet master behind the tragedy, the state offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He described Daphne as an incredibly manipulative and greedy individual who exerted immense psychological control over his family. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so desperate to protect her family from Daphne's spiritual threats that she had even suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money. The defense team strongly challenged Chow's credibility, arguing that he was a true beneficiary of the $850,000 of insurance payouts and had used the situation to his own financial advantage. Despite the defense's efforts, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the crime. While the legal proceedings concluded, the memories of Long Nguyen and Hong Liu remained clear in the hearts of those who knew them. The community in Arlington slowly healed, drawing strength from their shared values of unity, mutual support, and resilience. The story serves as a profound reminder of the dangers of greed and the enduring importance of